In the chilling silence of the first weeks of 2026, the British monarchy did what many thought was impossible. King Charles, acting with a cold and surgical finality, has officially stripped his son and daughter-in-law of their royal titles. There is no way back. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex are no more. This is not just a family spat. It is a tectonic shift in the very structure of the United Kingdom. What makes this move so shocking is that the exact security victory Prince Harry fought for in the halls of power has now become the constitutional reason for his permanent and irreversible exile. We are witnessing the moment a battle won turned into a war so badly lost, and the implications for the future of the crown are seismic. Before we dive into the secret documents and the hidden halls of power that orchestrated this move, you need to stay informed as this story breaks. Subscribe to our channel right now and turn on all notifications. The truth about the House of Windsor is changing every hour, and you cannot afford to miss a single second of this unfolding crisis. Join us as we pull back the curtain on the most significant royal event of the 21st century. For years, Prince Harry has been fighting a relentless war for his family's safety. It was a long, exhausting conflict fought not on a traditional battlefield, but in the sterile, merciless rooms of the British High Court. There were lawsuits, endless appeals, and public statements that felt like a barrage of artillery. It was the story of a father begging for help to keep his children safe from the same forces he believes took his mother's life. But with every legal filing, the distance between the prince in Montecito, California, and the ancient institution in London grew wider. The distance is not just 5,000 miles of ocean. It is a chasm of ideology, duty, and tradition. The breaking point arrived in May 2025. Harry had already lost his first case against the Home Office, which argued that the government had the right to handle his security on a case-by-case basis. Then came the second blow. A panel of judges at the Court of Appeal determined that the government's method was entirely legal, reasonable, and free of procedural unfairness. To any rational observer, the road had ended. The rule was written in stone. Only those who serve the state can enjoy the state's benefits, such as automatic, taxpayer-funded armed security. But Harry refused to accept the conclusion. In December 2025, he went a step further, sending a direct letter to the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. He demanded a new, full-scale risk assessment from the clandestine group known as RAVEC. And then, in the opening weeks of 2026, it happened. Sources close to the Sussexes leaked to the media that they had won. Automatic armed police security was supposedly nailed on for any future travel to the United Kingdom. In California, it must have felt like the ultimate triumph of willpower over an uncaring bureaucracy. However, inside the stone walls of Buckingham Palace, this victory was viewed as a fatal mistake. The win was a Trojan horse. By successfully advocating for a benefit that was directly tied to his status, Harry unknowingly revealed a deadly contradiction at the heart of his post-royal life. He wanted the rights of a working prince without the burden of the duties that come with them. Palace insiders now confirm that this was the absolute last straw for King Charles. The monarchy, built on a fragile balance of tradition and public service, could not allow such an anomaly to exist. If a non-working royal living overseas and building a commercial empire could demand the highest level of state protection, the entire system of honors and privileges would collapse. The king's response was a masterwork in institutional logic. It wasn't framed as a personal grudge or paternal retribution, but as a necessary piece of constitutional housekeeping. The palace made it clear, royal honors are not rights. They are gifts that can be revoked if the terms of service are not followed. Harry's greatest win had just cost him his identity. But as the ink dried on this decree, a darker precedent was already casting a shadow over the Sussexes. A precedent involving the king's own brother, whose total erasure from royal life provided the blueprint for Harry's downfall. The carnage was only just beginning. To understand the magnitude of what has just occurred, one must look past the headlines and into the cold, calculated logic of the British Constitution. Harry's security victory in early 2026 was an optical illusion, a mirage of success that masked a fatal miscalculation. By successfully lobbying the Home Secretary and forcing a new risk assessment from the clandestine committee known as RAVEC, Harry believed he had finally leveled the playing field. He believed he could command the same level of state-funded armed police protection as those who stand on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. But in the eyes of the king and his most senior advisors, Harry had just provided the crown with the very evidence it needed to sever his ties forever. The victory was a classic Trojan horse. By securing a benefit that is intrinsically and legally tied to the service of the state, Harry inadvertently created a constitutional paradox that the monarchy could not ignore. In the United Kingdom, the system of honors, styles, and titles is built upon a delicate, 1,000-year-old foundation of duty. You do not get the perks of the office without occupying the office. By demanding and receiving the highest level of state protection while simultaneously living as a private citizen in a foreign land and building a multi-million-dollar commercial empire, Harry had crossed a line that was once thought uncrossable. High-ranking courtiers and constitutional experts within the palace walls watched this legal maneuvering with a sense of grim clarity. They saw a non-working royal who had publicly and repeatedly criticized the institution, now claiming one of its most sacred and expensive privileges. If Harry were allowed to keep his titles while enjoying the state's most elite security apparatus from his home in California, the entire logic of the monarchy would begin to disintegrate. It would set a precedent where royalty becomes a menu of options, a buffet where one can pick the titles and the armed guards but skip the rainy Tuesday morning hospital openings and the lifelong commitment to public service. For King Charles, this was the ultimate moment of institutional housekeeping. The monarchy is not merely a family, it is a legal entity that must protect itself from any anomaly that threatens its survival. The king's decision to link the removal of all titles directly to this security outcome was a masterwork in legal strategy. It stripped the Sussexes of their narrative of victimization. The palace's messaging was as cold as a winter morning in the Highlands. Royal honors are not property. They are not intellectual assets that can be protected in a court of law or leveraged for a Netflix production. They are founts of honor gifts from the sovereign's personal grace that are conditional upon a code of conduct and a life of service. Harry's victory had effectively proven that he still considered himself a working royal in spirit and privilege, but not in practice. This contradiction was the last straw. The king realized that as long as Harry and Meghan held on to their titles of Duke and Duchess, every legal battle they fought and every security demand they made would be seen as an extension of the crown's will. To protect the institution, the king had to perform a clean, surgical break. By removing the titles, the legal basis for Harry's demands shifted from Prince of the Realm to private citizen, effectively neutralizing his ability to pressure the British government in the future. This was not a moment of paternal retribution, it was a cold necessity. The palace framed it as an unfortunate but unavoidable consequence of Harry's own choices. He had fought for a win that eventually cost him his birthright. It is an irony so sharp it could cut through stone. The very guards Harry wanted to protect his family are the reason his children will never be known as prince or princess within the British state. But as the Sussexes reel from this blow in Montecito, they should have seen the shadows lengthening long ago. The king did not invent this method of administrative execution on a whim. He had already tested it on another member of his own blood, a man whose fall from grace was so swift and so absolute that it served as a terrifying blueprint for what was to come. To see the true fate of Harry and Meghan, we must look back at the dark days of late 2025 and the final, crushing erasure of the man once known as the Duke of York. The ghost of Prince Andrew was about to haunt the Sussexes' future. To understand just how brutally and efficiently the Sussexes were cut off, one only needs to look back a few months to the grim end of another royal. The king did not invent this process of erasure for Harry. He perfected it on his own brother. In the late months of 2025, King Charles utilized a harsh, paperwork-based method to permanently strip the disgraced Prince Andrew of his royal style, his titles, and every honor that had been attached to his name since birth. The Andrew scenario serves as a chilling and unforgiving template for what has now befallen Harry and Meghan. It demonstrated to the world the sheer, unbridled power of the crown, a power that courts, high-priced public relations firms, and personal feelings cannot touch. The timeline of Andrew's destruction was a masterclass in institutional coldness. In mid-October 2025, Andrew made a desperate, small-scale announcement claiming he would stop using his Duke of York title on his own accord. It was an attempt to jump before he was pushed. But the palace had no interest in his voluntary resignation. On October 30th, Buckingham Palace made the official announcement that the removal process had begun. The gears of the ancient state machinery began to turn, and the final blow came with a speed that left the public breathless. The execution was made public on November 3rd, 2025, when the letters patent were published in the London Gazette, the official public record of the United Kingdom. To the average observer, the language seemed archaic, yet its meaning was devastatingly modern and absolute. The document was authorized under the Great Seal of the realm, the ultimate physical manifestation of the sovereign's will. It stated with terrifying simplicity that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor shall no longer be entitled to hold and enjoy the style, title, or attribute of Royal Highness or the titular dignity of Prince. In a single heartbeat, decades of royal status, a birthright he had possessed since the second he was born, were transformed into what experts call administrative uselessness. There was no drama in a courtroom, no way to file an appeal, and absolutely no opportunity for a settlement. Andrew lost his last remaining military ranks, including that of vice admiral, and was left with the hollow title of a retired commander. This is the reality of the royal prerogative. It is a power the monarch wields that requires no approval from Parliament. It is a constitutional weapon of last resort, a way to kill a royal identity without shedding a drop of blood. The precedent set by Andrew's downfall was harsh and unyielding. It sent a message across the Atlantic that the Sussexes tragically chose to ignore. If a blood prince, the son of the late Queen Elizabeth II, and the brother of the reigning king, could have his entire identity wiped away with a stroke of a pen because his behavior was deemed damaging to the institution, then what chance did a lesser royal have? What chance did a duke by marriage and a second son living in California have against the same machinery? Palace insiders now confirm that the move against Andrew was not merely about a scandal. It was a necessary act of survival for the monarchy. The crown, as an entity, must protect itself at all costs. When an individual's connections become a liability, the institution works with surgical precision to cut off the threat. This is the exact same tool that has now been turned against Harry and Meghan. Harry's dukedom of Sussex was never a birthright. It was a wedding gift from his grandmother in 2018. Meghan's status as a duchess was a courtesy. These were privileges granted, not rights inherited. The king's recent decree, which linked their revocation directly to the security battle, followed the exact same logic used against Andrew. It was not a personal grudge, it was a constitutional outcome. The Andrew precedent was a public warning shot that went unheeded in the sun-drenched hills of Montecito. Harry and Meghan believed they were different. They believed their global popularity and their media empire made them untouchable. But while they were playing the game of celebrity, the king was playing the game of thrones. And as the Sussexes would soon learn, the most dangerous place to be is in the crosshairs of a king who has decided you are no longer part of the future. But the legal erasure was only half the battle. To truly exile a prince, the king needed more than just a pen. He needed the backing of the people. And in 2025, the court of public opinion was about to deliver a verdict more crushing than any legal decree. Even a monarch with ancient, absolute powers cannot function in a vacuum. A sudden and long-lasting shift in public opinion is what finally paved the way for King Charles to take this bold, decisive step. The well of sympathy for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, which once seemed bottomless, had run completely dry by the end of 2025. The British public, and a significant portion of the global audience, had reached a state of total Sussex exhaustion. Years of tell-all interviews, podcasts, high-budget documentaries, and a best-selling memoir filled with grievances against the royal family had finally worn the world down. What started as a gripping story of escape and survival had, for many, curdled into a repetitive cycle of complaints and an overwhelming sense of entitlement. The data behind this decline is both stark and undeniable. In the late months of 2025, Meghan Markle reached a deeply unenviable milestone in her public life. She topped a major crowdsourced list of the most disliked celebrities in the world. While online polls can be fluid, her consistent placement at the summit surpassing figures involved in far more serious controversies reinforced a hardened public narrative. With over 59,000 negative votes at one point, the perception of the Duchess had shifted from a sympathetic figure to one seen as divisive and self-serving. Prince Harry did not fare much better, often trailing just behind her in the rankings of public disapproval. More rigorous polling from the globally recognized firm YouGov verified this downward trend across the United Kingdom. Throughout 2025, Meghan's approval rating languished between 20 and 21%, while a staggering majority of over 66% held a negative impression of her. Harry's results, though slightly higher, told a similar story of profound isolation, with positive sentiment hovering around 28 to 30% and negative impressions at 58%. These numbers refused to budge, even when rumors of reconciliation or developments in their security cases surfaced. The Sussex brand, which once promised a vibrant modernization of the monarchy, was now viewed as fundamentally at odds with the institution's core values of duty and quiet public service. This weary public mood provided the perfect political cover for the king's actions. His long-held vision of a slimmed-down monarchy, a more focused, efficient, and publicly supported institution struck a deep chord with a population tired of the never-ending spectacle in California. Polling from mid-2025 had already indicated that a large majority of the British people were in favor of the Sussexes losing their titles. So, when the king's proclamation finally arrived, it wasn't viewed as a stunning act of family cruelty. Instead, it was greeted as a happy and long-overdue conclusion to a chapter that had dragged on for far too long. The king wasn't just settling a family dispute, he was executing the will of the people. The British public was ready to cheer rather than protest because they wanted a monarchy that looked toward the future, not one anchored to the drama of the past. But while the public celebrated, the Sussex camp was reeling from a trail of their own mistakes, a series of tactical errors and grand illusions that led them straight into this trap. They believed they were playing a game of global influence, but they failed to realize that their own strategy was built on sand. As we look closer at the months leading up to the final break, it becomes clear that the Sussexes were blinded by a mirage of their own making, and the architect of their downfall might have been their own reflection. The downfall of the Sussexes was not a sudden accident. It was the result of a long trail of shocking mistakes and grand illusions. For months leading up to the final break, the camp in Montecito had meticulously crafted a narrative of warming relations and anticipated reconciliation. Certain royal reporters, most notably Charlotte Griffiths of the Mail on Sunday, had been fueling this fire. In the middle to late months of 2025, a series of exclusive stories suggested that secret peace talks were happening behind closed doors. There were reports of high-ranking advisors meeting in London to initiate a new era of communication. These accounts were frustratingly specific. They spoke of Harry making last-minute changes to his itinerary to meet with his father and the king's supposed willingness to take small steps forward despite his health challenges. This created a powerful echo chamber of hope, largely generated by Sussex-friendly media outlets. Many believed that Harry was finally making progress in repairing the bridge to his family. But as the weeks evolved into months, these hopeful green shoots failed to grow. The big family reunions never happened. The short tea gatherings that were whispered about did not result in any tangible change. The reality was far colder. While the Sussexes were busy leaking stories of potential olive branches, Buckingham Palace was maintaining a wall of silence. Critics and online royal watchers were quick to point out a pattern that had become all too familiar. A loop of making big promises in the media that were never followed through in reality. What looked like progress was, in fact, nothing more than wishful thinking or a desperate PR strategy to keep the Sussexes relevant in the royal story. They were acting like they lived in a world where everything was a transaction, a media deal, or a public relations win. They thought that if they could win the battle for headlines, they could win the war for the monarchy. This fundamental misunderstanding of the institution was their greatest error. Harry and Meghan treated the British crown like a modern business with a complaints department. They believed that tenacity, public pressure, and legal maneuvering could force an ancient organization to bend to their will. They thought that state security was a service to be negotiated, and that royal status was a contract that could be modified. This aggressive strategy did not create goodwill. It gave King Charles the perfect, unassailable reason to take strong action. It transformed a messy family dispute into a matter of institutional survival. The security victory they celebrated in early 2026 was the ultimate proof of their disconnect. Instead of opening the door to a negotiated peace, it slammed the door shut and locked it forever. They had successfully argued for the privileges of royalty, but in doing so, they had violated the core principle of the institution: service. By the time they realized the trap they had walked into, it was too late. The king's move was not an act of revenge. It was the logical end to a chapter that the Sussexes themselves had written through a series of tactical blunders. But as the dust settles on this permanent break, one figure remains standing quietly in the background, watching the collapse of the Sussex Empire with a sense of deep and quiet satisfaction. He is the quiet architect of the future, a man who has been waiting for this moment of institutional clarity for years. While Harry and Meghan were chasing the spotlight, his brother was preparing for a reign that would leave no room for the drama of the past. The shadows of the future are now falling over the throne, and the next king is already making his presence felt. As King Charles delivers the final public decision in the Sussex saga, one figure stands quietly in the background, a portrait of calm and controlled satisfaction. Prince William, the future king, has watched this constitutional reckoning unfold, with a sense of deep and silent relief. Palace insiders suggest that for William, this was not a moment of family sadness, but a long-awaited victory for the institution he was born to protect. For years, the Prince of Wales and his team have viewed the growing drama not as a crisis to be managed, but as a catalyst for the institutional clarity the monarchy desperately needed. William has long been the quiet architect of a leaner, more disciplined monarchy, one that prioritizes public service, fiscal responsibility, and strict protocol. The fact that non-working royals were living in California while demanding state-funded benefits, including elite armed police protection, was the greatest challenge to that vision. It was a messy, lingering loose end that contradicted the very essence of duty. By pushing the security issue to its breaking point, Harry unwittingly gave his brother the perfect, non-personal reason to sever the relationship for good. The king's action has ensured that by the time William ascends the throne, the Sussex problem will be a closed chapter of history. This proactive constitutional housekeeping also safeguards William's own young family. It enshrines the principle that royal status is earned through service, not simply inherited or maintained through legal threats. While Harry and Meghan were occupied with court fights and media blitzes, William remained dutiful, almost boringly so. By focusing on hospitals, the environment, and mental health, he reinforced the monarchy's fundamental ideals. The contrast could not be clearer. To the public, William is the stable, forward-looking custodian of a 1,000-year-old flame, while Harry is seen as a man who tried to trade that flame for the flickering lights of Hollywood. But as the walls of the palace grow quiet, the aftershocks in Montecito are only beginning. The sovereign decree has stripped away the intrinsic aura that made the Sussex brand so valuable. Their business ventures, ranging from multi-million-dollar partnerships with Netflix to Meghan's lifestyle brand, American Riviera Orchard, were all built on the fine line between celebrity and royalty. Now, that line has been erased. Hollywood operates on a harsh math of perception and money-making relevance. Industry experts are already warning of a quick and scary review of the couple's status. Being associated with figures who have been constitutionally beaten by the British crown is now seen as an unnecessary risk for major global brands. The financial repercussions will likely last far longer than any legal bill. Agents and executives are reportedly advising clients to distance themselves, fearing the couple's reputation for being divisive and out of touch. The missed opportunities and canceled partnerships could add up to tens of millions. The Sussexes gambled that they could monetize their royal proximity forever, but the king has shown that their foundation was built on sand. They are now competing in a cutthroat market based on the quality of their content alone, stripped of the titles that gave them a competitive edge. The king wasn't just settling a family dispute, he was agreeing with the pulse of the people and the cold logic of the state. The palace walls are silent tonight, because the tempest has finally passed. The line has been drawn, the institution stands streamlined, and the path to the future is clear. Was the king's move an act of necessary housekeeping, or a bridge burned too far? We want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Has the monarchy finally modernized, or has it lost its heart? Thank you for watching our deep dive into this royal earthquake. Please like and subscribe for more untold stories from behind the palace gates. Goodbye for now.